Read UN Resolution 1929, which says if Iran comes to, which created the sanctions, following on Resolution 1737, and it says that if Iran comes to the table to negotiate, all the sanctions will be lifted. To negotiate, not to conclude a deal. Well, we concluded a deal. And they argued you should be lifting all the sanctions. And guess what? We haven't. So I think there's a lot of misinterpretation of what this deal is about and what it achieves for us. We, by virtue of this deal, will have a limitation on their stockpile of 300 kilograms, not 12,000. We will have a limitation for 15 years for that and for their enrichment at 3.67%. Folks, you cannot make a nuclear weapon with 300 kilograms and 3.67%. Physically impossible. We will have 24/7 inspection of all their declared facilities. Natanz, Fordow ceases to do any enrichment. There will be no fissile material there for 15 years. They're turning it into a technology center. And they'll have medical isotope research and other stuff. That's it. The only enriching facility in Iran will be Natanz, open and visible. We will have a 20-year restriction on their centrifuge production with live television cameras watching the rotors and bellows and so forth, so we have accountability. And quite extraordinarily, we have 25 years of cradle-to-grave accountability for their uranium. Mining, milling, yellow cake production, gasification, centrifuge, and waste. That's in itself. Our intelligence community tells us it will be physically impossible for them to have an entire covert, separate fuel production capacity. And without it, folks, you can't make a bomb. So you say, what do we gain? We gain extraordinary insight and accountability to Iran's program. We gain very specific access and ability to access. We gain restraints on their program for years, including R&D on advanced centrifuges, et cetera. Now, you're all going to say, okay, what happens after that when those 15 years are over and there's a transition? They become an NPT country. They earn their way back by providing this access and visibility. But we don't give that up at year 15 because they have to pass and adopt and ratify the additional protocol before the end of the sanctions. And if they don't, it's a material breach of this agreement. We have the ability to snap back all of the sanctions. And again, what we negotiated is a unique arrangement where one nation alone, say the United States, if we're not happy, we can go to the Security Council. And we alone can force a vote on the snapping back of those sanctions. And the vote is already structured in the UN resolution that was passed the other day as a reverse vote. The vote will be on whether or not to continue the lifting of the sanctions. So one country alone, the United States, could veto that vote, and we don't continue the lifting, and they all snap back. What I do know is this. If we turn our backs on this deal, folks, we're sending one hell of a message to the hardliners in Iran, and they'll feel good, and we will see them. And Rouhani made, who knows what happens in an election. We won. We kept them in for 8 years on the missiles under Chapter 40, under Article 41, Chapter 7 of the United Nations, and on the arms for 5 years. But those aren't the only tools we have at our disposal, folks, to be able to deal with those issues. That's what's important. We have the missile control technology regime. We have the nuclear proliferation structure. We have multiple UN resolutions that prohibit Iran from transferring weapons to Hezbollah, to the Shia militia in Iraq, to the Houthi, to Libya, to North Korea, all of which we can enforce. Now let me underscore to everybody here. There are probably 70 to 80,000 missiles of one kind or another, rockets, in Lebanon, pointing at Israel, Tel Aviv. Those were put there before we began negotiating. For years, nobody has pressed this issue of the transfer of these weapons sufficiently. But we've begun to do that. A couple of months ago, I guess it was, when you saw a convoy coming down out of Iran heading towards Yemen. I was on the phone in an instant to my counterpart and made it very, very clear that this could be a major confrontation, that we were not going to tolerate it. And he called me back, indeed, within a short span of time and said they will not land, they're not going to unload anything, they're not going to go out of international waters, and then they went home. So every single bit of what I described, the 300 kilograms has to be reached, the 3.67%. The Arak calandria, which is the core of the Arak reactor, has to be taken out and filled with concrete. They have to dismantle all the centrifuges. 2/3 of them have to be taken out. Piping and electrical has to be taken out. Vast amount of infrastructure undone. We have to undo the centrifuges and the current activities of Fordow and create this lab. All of this has to be done. PMD has to be resolved before they get 1 ounce of sanctions relief. Now that could take 6 months, could take a year. I don't know how long. Depends how fast they do all of that. But the IAEA has to certify that all of that has been done, and we have received our 1-year breakout time before they get a dime.